Sometimes there are these moments in our lives that change things about us, often in ways we don't realize at the time. And for me, one of them was when I was in high school, when a friend told me about their uncle, an engineer who was building water systems in Africa. And I remember it with this amazing clarity because as soon as I heard those words, I felt like I knew it was what I wanted to do. I loved the way they sounded, building water systems in Africa. Like they were valiant and noble. Like it was this career that society said was good, and that made me good. So despite my obvious ignorance, as if Africa were one homogeneous place and not 56 countries with 3,000 ethnic groups, building water systems in Africa became this goal I committed to. It led me to pursue my degree in engineering and specialization in civil environmental, following in the footsteps of the proverbial uncle I had aspired to become. And it led me to orient all of my summer work experience to be within the water sector so I could come to understand the industry. And so when I connected with my current supervisor, who was already doing research on safe water access in a rural Tanzanian community called Longido, all of a sudden, I arrived. What was once just an idea became an opportunity. The only problem was I had no idea what it was that I was actually supposed to do. I had told myself this story for so long that I never really grasped what it meant. So I had to figure it out. And coming from engineering, I tried to figure it out by coming at the problem from what I would call an engineering lens. I tried to break it into its component parts and find an appropriate technology to address a specific concern. I guess, in essence, I had the idea that one designs the material world to create harmony within it. That with a quality of material came a quality of all kinds. So in my early stages, I narrowed in on one technology in particular called a ceramic water filter. This porous flower pot looking device that had already garnered interest among leaders of the Maasai community in Longido. And I thought that by redesigning it to be cheaper and more effective, I'd expand its affordability envelope, improving safe water access in Longido and beyond. So when I finally had the opportunity to go there, I took this idea with me, and when I was in a meeting with some members of the Maasai community, I thought it was my time to shine. But before I could even speak, a colleague turned to me, touched me gently on the arm and said, "Stop. Just listen." And at first, I was unsure what she meant, as I was there to share and to try to present how I wanted to bring clean water to their homes. But what she was saying is that no one makes change alone. In fact, what she was saying is that change isn't something someone does. It's not created or fabricated by one person just because they say they want things to be different. They say they want things to be better. She was saying change is movement, only possible together, and bringing clean water to homes is simply much more complicated than taking tech you think's awaited by some keen elated faces, just because you've seen the science in academic gated spaces, before you've really grown to know its situated places, and especially with our history of theft, belittlement, and hate. A history whose impacts are still deeply felt to date, for it's a history of telling local people what they know isn't relevant to the development of an economy for growth, and thus a history that's left a scar of great and equal power. One which didn't only leave many feeling sour, but led to such complex dynamics that must be carefully navigated, or else I risk perpetuating the injustice it created. Slowly I started realizing that this perspective, that I could engineer a better future, was backwards. Technology is useful, but it's not going to solve any problems. People are. And over time, this has been proven to me over and again in Longido, where I see technology as provided, but nothing changes. Because technology itself is just not enough. So why did I afford so much power to it? How did I come to see development in that light? And the more I reflected on these biases and assumptions, the more I saw the way they fit within an historical narrative that extended far beyond me or any other person who's wanted to build water systems in Africa. Because helping and bringing new technology to the field didn't make me the agent for change like I thought it did. It made me a participant in the legacy of colonialism. Because the colonial project was also structured as an enterprise in giving. Colonists wanted to help the colonized by bringing what they called civilization or modernity to them. They wanted to give things like clothes, culinary practices, government structures, and technology to their subjected populations in an effort to make them look more like their own countries. It was an effort to do good, to be valiant and noble, if you will. And over time, though, the language and practices of extortion and racism used by the colonizers has been condemned, and rightfully so, of course. Their idea of development remains very prevalent today. It's still defined by how much countries in the global south looked like those in the global north, by how much they participate in global market or how much they export. And the practice of development is still defined by giving. Giving things to people who need us, the development actors. So with that in mind, it's no wonder technology transfer remains so central today, because technology is really easy to give. And because it really can be helpful in many ways, it makes it feel like in so doing, progress is being made. So in the case of safe water access, where 1 in 4 people are still living without it, relying on methods that can achieve that progress at the massive scale that's needed makes a lot of sense. And we can see this really most clearly by looking at the sector's dependence on boreholes and wells to provide people with water, with 75% of those living across Africa relying on water from these sources and hundreds more being dug every day. Because they are the definition of a scalable technology. They're easy to construct quickly and cheap to install. There's something that can be given, tracked as a benchmark of progress, and built all over the place, especially in rural areas where 85% of those without safe water live. But by and large, this approach has failed. 70% of those boreholes don't work. And rural communities have seen a 14% improvement in water access since 2000, compared with 580% for urban areas as a result, because a lack of a borehole, or any technology for that matter, isn't what caused these places to lack safe water access. It's a symptom. A symptom of a system that maintains the condition of having plenty in some places and much less in others. Because though we talk about the way we think the world is ought to be, where anyone can lead a life of love and liberty, in actuality it's a fallacy. And our system has a malady where inequity is the basis from which we construct reality, yet we call this normality. Talk about morality, it's frugality, brutality, dressed up like neutrality or disguised as practicality, but it stems from a mentality where we allow human rights to depend on nationality. It's what I've come to call the economic reduction paradox. This way we reduce our definition of value into economic terms and produce marginality as a result. Because the true value of safe water access, or any human right for that matter, can't be captured by its contribution to GDP growth. It can't be captured by the amount of revenue it generates. It's derived from the principle that we claim to be self-evident, that all people are created equal. Yet this is not the way we govern. Governments everywhere continue to underfund water services, and even with the huge percentage of private companies and charities that make up the water sector, our most optimistic estimates suggest that less than 50% of those funds needed to achieve universal safe water access are actually being spent. because it's just not our priority. People are seldom chosen over profit. Moreover, with the limited funding relative to the scale of the challenge, the dependence on technology-driven development makes even more sense because every dollar has to be stretched as far as it can go to reach the most amount of people possible. So we focused on where it's easiest to give, in cities, and rely on what's easiest to give, technology. But when it inevitably breaks and there's no one there to fix them, people are left behind. But what I've learned in the years that I've been doing this work is that development doesn't have to be this way. And in fact, real progress is way more likely when the goals and objectives are defined by the members of each community. This is why over the course of 2 years, I spoke with students, teachers, nurses, doctors, community organizers, basically anyone from Longito that I could get to sit down with me so I could learn everything I could about the community and its unique character. So when we finally did start to implement, we had a locally informed idea of what types of programs may work and who should be the ones to present them. So we started working with schools where we provided new filters and worked with teachers and students on creating a culture around the importance of safe water and sanitation and hygiene. And we had our local staff, Maasai women themselves, checking in regularly, addressing challenges as they arrived, and if needed or wanted, running new workshops. And we also started working with women's groups where we went even further and didn't only provide filters for them to use in their homes, but we had those same local staff attend weekly meetings to speak with participants about their lives with water, to tell stories together, and through that promote health-conscious behaviors around water and the filters in a way that our participants can relate to, and in a way that helps them keep using these filters over time. And though this work has been really hard, and I've made a lot of mistakes, and I'm certainly still making them, the philosophy behind it all continues to prove true. Technology-dependent intervention in water can't be about provision. It has to be about forming ongoing relationships where local practice and tradition and culture are embedded throughout. And though I still spend hours in the lab every day working on these filters because good technology has a lot of value, I've learned that in truth, this part of my work means nothing without an implementation plan that's focused on local self-determination. And yes, this is expensive. And yes, it takes time to establish. So beyond just improving methods, we have to talk about the politics that brought us here. We have to ask ourselves, what is it that we care about most? Because from what I've seen, it's not human rights and it's not equality, but it can be, and it should be. Because in the famous words of the civil rights icon Fannie Lou Hamer, nobody is free until everybody is free. We have to replace our politics of austerity with a politics of service. Replace our philosophy of individualism with one of collectiveness and choose a future where anybody, no matter who they are, can thrive. Thank you.